Love is a country without a map. It's a gift the heart loves to unwrap. But love can lead us into traps from which there's no escape. Arna and the pirates all at sea. Nancy could not or would not speak for days after her rescue. She lay in a hammock, clutching the empty socket where her pearly eye had been. "Queen," they called me, she whispered miserably. "Queen." When she finally did get up, she straightened her back, put on her hat, and she began to give orders to the crew to clean the decks, tighten the ropes, and check the cargo hold for leaks. The pirates looked at one another doubtfully. "You're not captain anymore, Nancy," Billy had to tell her. "Of course I am. Who else would be?" "I am," Arna answered her from the top of the stairs by the captain's cabin. "You abandoned us, you stole my pearl, and now you think you can just walk back in and tell us what to do?" "Oh, come on," Nancy laughed, turning to the others. "Now who are you going to have as captain? An experienced pirate? Or some diving girl who has spent half her life underwater, not sailing on top of it?" The pirates exchanged doubtful looks. "Well," said Jake, "that diving girl hasn't abandoned us when she got a taste for power." "Right," said Pete, "and that diving girl rescued you when you was about to sink into the waves." "Oh, good grief. All right then, let's see how long this lasts." "Right then, Captain, what are your orders?" "My orders?" Arna began. "Well, they are to—" But then she stopped as she heard something. She walked to the side of the boat and then dove into the sea in one graceful movement. "See, I told you she wouldn't be captain for long." But then they heard the sounds of Arna climbing up the rope ladder on the side of the boat, and she emerged holding a piece of tree bark in her hand. She was staring hard at it, doing her best to read the letters that until recently had looked like strange squiggles, but which now, thanks to the lessons that Nancy had given her, she recognized as words. Dripping with water, she looked up and announced, "My orders are to sail to Pearl Bay. My father needs me." Meanwhile, the king walked around the stinking, ragged shape of Ma Angie, sizing her up. From the moment he saw the look in her eyes, he knew her heart was rotten to the core, and thus she was potentially useful to him. "Tell me where my daughter is, or I will have my hawks tear out your eyes."
Meh. What's worth seeing in this ugly world anyway?
"Tell me where my daughter is, or I'll cut out your tongue."
Who's worth talking to in this world anyway?
"Tell me where my daughter is, or I'll have all of your teeth pulled out by the roots." Ma Angie looked up at the king defiantly.
Then I'll get someone else to chew my food for me.
The king growled in approval and ordered his prisoner to be unchained, washed and fed. When she had been returned to him an hour later wearing maroon silk robes, green tea was brought for them to drink, and they sat at a low table on carpets made of children's hair. "And so, what is it you want?"
Gold. A ship. A job.
"And if I give you these things, you'll tell me where my daughter is?"
I don't know where your daughter is.
But as the king began to snarl, she added,
"But I do know where she will be. Now listen."
The wind kept changing directions as they sailed towards Pearl Bay, and the sunrise had to keep shifting its course to catch it. At times the breeze vanished altogether, and Arna could barely contain her frustration and worry as she paced about her cabin. She was dreadfully concerned about her father, and yet also excited to see him again after so long. How amazed he would be to see her grown into a woman. But could it really be that he was dying? It must be some mistake. And amid all these conflicting emotions, there remained a doubt in her mind, like a stone in her shoe. How had her father managed to write her a message when he didn't know how? So it was with immense relief when Dace in the crow's nest climbed down the mast to gesture that she'd seen land. Arna took the captain's telescope and made out a line of palm trees in the distance, and her heart rose to her mouth. Home. She thought she would never see it again. They sailed in past the coral reefs where she had dived on so many occasions, and they passed boats full of pearl divers who stared in wonder at the pirate ship, completely failing to recognize Arna as she stood proudly at the helm. They dropped anchor in the harbour, and a rowboat was lowered into the water, and Arna chose to take Nancy with her as her bodyguard. However unfaithful a friend she had been, Nancy was undeniably far and away the best fighter on the ship. And since the message had arrived, Nancy had gone through something of a change of heart, and had become kinder to Arna again, sympathizing for her family troubles. They rowed into the shore, and Arna jumped out while the water was still waist deep to drag the boat onto the sands. Her heart leapt as she saw her father walking towards her with an enormous smile on his face that mirrored her own. But then her smile turned into a gasp of horror as she saw walking behind Luceo the woman she had seen so many times in her nightmares, Ma Angie. Nancy, too, sensed something was wrong and had a hand on her sword, and moments later drew it as King's soldiers came bursting out from behind the palm trees where they had been hiding. 12 of them came charging towards them, and Arno and Nancy stood back to back, both of them with their swords in their hand. The soldiers were well trained, but if they thought it was going to be easy to capture 2 young women, they soon changed their minds. Nancy's blade seemed to cut the air into shreds, and after the first few wounds on their shoulders and thighs, the soldiers hardly dared approach. Arna, too, fought with such a fury that 2 of the soldiers lost their swords in the sand, and a couple of fingers besides. But then they heard a cry from Luceo, and turned to see Ma Angie with a knife at his throat.
"Drop your swords, or the old man dies. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
They didn't doubt for a moment that she was telling the truth. Arna threw down her sword bitterly, and Nancy couldn't hold off all the soldiers as they rushed in from all sides. They were disarmed and bound up with rope, and they looked back at the sunrise to see if the pirates were watching and might perhaps mount a rescue. But their eyes met with a truly appalling sight. 6 king's ships had sailed in, 3 on either side of the sunrise, and it was immediately clear there would be no escape.
"Anna, so nice to see you. I told you this day would come."
And if you'd like to find out what happens to Arna, what happens to Nancy, has Ma Angie really triumphed? What will the king do to Nancy when he sees her again? Well, you better listen to the next episode. If you're enjoying these stories, please tell your friends. My name is Tom Thumb. I write and record them for you. If you have any questions about stories, any feedback, if you're enjoying them, why not let me know? You can write to me on the contact form at tomthumb.org. Arna and the pirates all at sea. Oh, Arna and the pirates all at sea. Arna and the pirates all at sea, and they'd never come home again. Oh, they'd never come